This session's topic is all about season extension. Plus, we're going to do a little bit talking about planting your garlic and harvesting sweet potatoes, because these are two very timely topics, or I guess three very timely topics for early mid-September. We will be handing out cover crops. We've picked those up from our supplier up in Virginia, and we will be handing them out next Tuesday. Rosie's going to send out information about how to sign up. I think we're just going to have it at the office. We are still waiting on our garlic order to come in. That will probably be here late this month, early next month. And then we are waiting on our row cover for season extension. And hopefully that'll be here at the same time the garlic will. There's still some COVID supply disruptions on the row cover. So we ordered it many weeks ago and it is still not here. So we're waiting to see how that plays out, and we will let you know when those pickup dates are, when we know when they are. So final harvest totals will be due right at the end of October. We'll send you a specific date, but that'll cover I think August, September, and October, those 3 months. So please keep track of your harvest totals, especially as you are harvesting, all the heavy stuff like sweet potatoes and winter squash, all that fun stuff. That's really going to boost our harvest numbers. So please keep track of all of that as best you can. We will be sending out an end of program survey. We super appreciate your feedback. We try to incorporate feedback from folks as best we can every year. So this is your way of telling us what we can do better. And then a couple of other things pertaining to our parent organization, Appalachian RC&D Council. We are about to launch applications for the field school, our beginning farmer training program. So our winter session, which will start in November, is a business planning for beginning farmers. So we'll cover all aspects of business planning, marketing, financial planning. We'll talk about all kinds of different support programs, grants, cost share, loan programs, all that good stuff that are available to farmers in Tennessee. So if you have a farm, if you are thinking of starting a farm, or if you want even just like a market garden, you want to do commercial production out of your garden of some sort, then this is the program for you. It's geared towards small and mid-scale beginning farmers. So if you want, I think we are launching the application on Wednesdays, so we will send everyone a link to that, and feel free to reach out for more information on that. We'd be happy to talk with you about what that program entails. And then also we are currently doing our Appalachian Fusion fundraiser, and that is normally an in-person kind of fancy sit-down dinner, but it still doesn't feel safe to do that right now. So we are instead doing campfire kits. I think Rosie just plopped a link in the chat. I'm not looking at the chat, but hopefully that's what she just did. So if you are able to, we'd super appreciate from the bottom of our hearts you purchasing a campfire kit to support our fundraiser. And that includes awesome supplies for s'mores and I think hot chocolate, and also access to a fun playlist and some campfire activities so you can hang out with your family and friends and enjoy this beautiful fall weather that we are hopefully getting into. If you can't right now afford to support the fundraiser, even if you could just share a link on Facebook or share an email with folks you know and telling them about the fundraiser, that'd be super amazing also. So we are a nonprofit and we do have to spend a lot of time hustling for money. So this is one way that we help keep the lights on and keep the programs going for ARCD. So we think any support you can offer, we appreciate that. So we will get on with season extension. So what is season extension? Basic definition. It just means prolonging the amount of time that plants can survive in your garden using protective materials and techniques. So generally, this has to do in the growing in the winter and protecting plants from frost damage, but it can also pertain to the summer. Like there's a lot of heat sensitive crops like lettuce and spinach, mostly leafy greens. So this could extend into the summer also, figuring out ways to extend cool season crops into the summer. But right now we're really going to focus on how to get the most out of growing in the winter. And so even just basic cloth coverings, lightweight cloth coverings, like you see in this picture here, will offer 4 to 6 weeks protection on either end. So that is an extra 2 or 3 months of growing even warmer season crops than you would get without protection. So for a lot of more winter hardy and cold hardy plants, really with just kind of minimal protection, you can get, you can have food coming out of your garden 12 months out of the year. So I talked a little bit at our last session. If you missed that, you can go back onto the YouTube channel and watch it. I talked a lot about last time about choosing plant varieties and how to do timing of planting so that you can have stuff growing in the winter. And so this session is really going to focus on protecting those crops from the cold weather once you've got them planted. So this season extension techniques includes building structures to protect plants from winter weather and dry winds, using a lot of mulch. This is really important to help insulate the soil and the plant roots. So the mulch, putting 6 inches of mulch around all of your plants just helps regulate the temperature at the soil level and helps prevent frost heave, which I'll show you a little diagram in a minute. And then using row cover, like I mentioned in the last session, choosing the right varieties, and also some luck. If it gets down to 15 degrees, this row cover is going to protect most of your plants and keep them alive. If it gets down to 0 degrees, everything may die, regardless of how much protection you're giving them. It's just, well, collards will probably survive. Collards generally survive whatever. But a lot of things are, sensitive to a point, and then if it gets too cold, then they die. So, if we get a couple days in a row of 0 degree temperatures, which is very unusual for around here, if that happens though, then, you're out of luck in terms of growing year round. But most years, it really doesn't get below 15 degrees, for more than a day or two at a time. So generally you can keep things alive through the whole winter. So row cover, also known as frost cloth, people talk about use different names for it. It comes in different grades of thickness. Obviously, the thicker it is, the more frost protection it offers. And generally that is distinguished by the number on the brand. So like an Agribon is a brand that's pretty popular. You can get it pretty easily on the internet. We get GrowGuard. I think GrowGuard is a little more resistant to tearing. I've had better luck with the GrowGuard. Unfortunately, there's fewer places where you can purchase it. So there's a bit more of a supply bottleneck on the GrowGuard, unfortunately, but hopefully it'll arrive in time to help us. It's also more affordable than the Agribon, and I think better quality too. So we get the GrowGuard 34, but a comparable one would be the Agribon 30 if you're looking to just purchase some. So this is a 1 ounce fabric weight. That's just another way of measuring it. So the thicker the cloth, the more frost protection you get, but it also means less sunlight gets to your plants. So this means, only 70% of the light gets through the cloth to your plants. So if you got a thicker grade of fabric, like an Agribon 50 or something, that would mean only 50% of the light gets down to your plants. So it will provide a few more degrees of frost protection being thicker, but it will also make your plants grow more slowly or not at all because they're not getting enough sunlight. So around in East Tennessee, I think the 30 or 34 grade fabric is sufficient protection for most winters. if you're looking to purchase some for yourself. The 1 ounce fabric that we're getting offers 2 to 4 degrees of frost protection. So this is important right on the shoulders of the season if you're trying to keep some of your summer crops alive. So with just this basic fabric, I've been able to keep like peppers, for instance, alive, through December some years, not every year. If we get a really hard frost in November, they're not going to make it. But so a pepper plant might die naturally at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but with the frost cloth protection, you may be able to get temperatures down to 30. So if we just get a really light frost, 32 or 31 degrees, you think summer crops like peppers may be able to pull through for a few more weeks with the cloth, whereas they would die immediately without it. So that's just something to consider. You don't have to keep your peppers alive as long as you can. I, however, love eating peppers, and probably tomatoes are going to be too tall for this particular system, but you may be able to keep summer squash or other shorter plants alive under fabric if that's something you're interested in doing. I'll talk a little bit more in a few slides about larger structures like high tunnels or caterpillar tunnels, if folks are interested in constructing something larger that could fit tomatoes in there and get some of your larger plants through 4 to 6 more weeks at the end of the season. And this also works on the beginning of the season too. So tomatoes shouldn't go out into the garden. Tomatoes and peppers shouldn't go out into the garden until early May. But if you have these tunnels ready to go, you can actually get your tomatoes, your tomatoes and peppers and all those summer crops out, 2, 4, 6 weeks early, depending on what the weather forecast is looking like. So you can get them in earlier so they have more time to grow and they start producing sooner than they would without protection. So it goes both ends of the season with these. So it's pretty neat. It's low cost. It's pretty effective, but it does entail a little bit of luck on these warm season crops. So for cold hardy crops, and this includes your leafy greens, root crops like carrots and parsnips and turnips, that kind of stuff, they're fairly frost tolerant. And the row cover will keep them alive through most winters, provided it does not get too cold. And that's probably below 15 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So the plants will still freeze under the row cloth. Once it gets below about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, they will freeze inside the high tunnels. And that's okay, because these plants are frost tolerant. They will pop back to life once it warms up enough for them to do so. So what actually will kill these plants and why you need this cloth covering over them, because if they freeze and then they are exposed to air circulation, that will actually desiccate the cells of the plant. So it's not the freezing that kills them, it's actually the desiccation from air circulation that will kill them. So by having the row cover protecting the plants, they freeze and then they're allowed to thaw and warm up without the desiccation happening to their cells. So they're able to recover from the freezing, no problem. So you just don't want them to dry out, and that's why the cover is important. So the cloth provides a protective barrier that keeps the air temperature around the plants more even and a little warmer, and that's how it keeps them alive. Even so, you may go out there the first frost and you're like, my plants are all frozen. That's okay. Most of them, the cold hardy crops like your leafy greens and your root vegetables and that kind of thing, they will survive being totally frozen. And in fact, they will actually get a little sweeter because plants respond to freezing by producing more sugar. Sugar is a natural antifreeze. So you can just experience this on your own. You can go out and taste some of your kale now and it'll be a little more bitter, and then after the first frost, if you go out and taste it, you'll notice a significant sweetness to it. So freezing actually improves the flavor of a lot of these types of plants, which is another reason why to keep growing in the winter. So Also with season extension, you can go the other way and cold. So these plants are able to survive freezing, no problem. The real issue comes, and the way you can actually go wrong and kill your plants is if you leave the rows covered when it gets too hot outside. So when it gets really above 45 degrees outside, that row cover is going to trap a bunch of heat into the around the plants. And so if it's 45 degrees outside, it may be in the 90s under your tunnel. If it gets to be 50 or 60 and you still have the fabric over it, it could be, above 100. And that may run into the problem of frying your plants. And so you may kill them because they get too hot in the middle of the winter with these. It's really a pretty powerful heat trap under that tunnel. So you really have to be careful and watch the weather report. So if it's cold, if it's up below 40, don't worry about it that day. You can leave the tunnel on. But if it's going to get above 45, you really need to be paying attention and remove the row cover during the day. If it's going to get cold again at night, you can put the row cover back on. So you do have to pay attention in the winter just to make sure that you aren't frying your plants to death with the tunnels. This with the fabric, you have a little more leeway. It's not going to trap as much heat as quickly as, say, plastic covering will. So if you are using a greenhouse structure or you've gotten some greenhouse plastic to put over your rows, that really, if it gets above 40, you're going to need to take that plastic off or vent it in some way so that the plants aren't going to fry. So you have a little more leeway with the fabric than you do with plastic. Besides row cover, it's really good to mulch heavily around each of your plants. Straw, shredded leaves, lawn clippings, whatever material you have. And this really keeps the temperature on the ground even, because if there's a rapid change in temperature, if the ground freezes and then thaws rapidly, you can get a frost heave happening, and you run into problem because this can actually separate the plant from its roots. When the top of the ground and a few inches below the soil go in different directions from the frost heave, it'll take the plant and the roots in different directions, and so it'll kill the plant that way. So the way you prevent that is by putting a thick layer of mulch, and so that makes the ground freeze slower and it makes it thaw slower too. So you get a more even adjustment of temperatures around the soil level, so that you don't get these violent heaves when it freezes. And you've probably seen that in lawn or in tilled soil, where after a frost there's all of a sudden just different chunks of soil sitting out, and that's because the frost heave has just caused it to buckle. So you want to prevent that by just having about 6 or more inches of mulch around the base of each plant. So this is my fabric versus plastic. I think fabric's more affordable than plastic. But a lot of folks do on the commercial level and at home will use a UV resistant greenhouse grade plastic. Don't just use any plastic, clear plastic that you find at the hardware store. It really needs to be greenhouse grade. Otherwise, the sun is basically just going to cause it to fall apart. So a good 6 mil greenhouse plastic is a good thickness. If you take care of it, you should get 2 or 3 years out of it. This is something you could probably buy online, or you may be able to find it at like Mize or something. But you're probably going to have to buy it online. So again, like I said, plastic traps more heat, so you really have to pay attention to the weather forecast and take it off or vent it if it's going to get too hot. And because the plastic's not permeable, you'll probably have to run irrigation under it in order to make sure that your plants get the amount of water that they need. Plants will naturally need less water in the winter. And so if you just have the fabric is permeable to water, so water will get to your plants, and you probably don't need to add extra water in the winter if you are using fabric. So that's what I said. Fabric is more permeable. It traps slightly less heat. So you have more flexibility. And when it gets a little warmer, it's cheaper. You can also double up fabric. So if it's going to get really, really cold and you want to try to save your plants, you could put a double layer of fabric over them. And that air between the layers will help trap a little more heat along your plants and hopefully keep them alive. If you take care of it, you should probably get 3 or 4 years out of it. And that just means, at the end of or at the beginning of spring, just take it in and or let it air out and dry for a day or two, and then wrap it up and put it somewhere like in your garage so that it's not exposed to the elements. And just personally, I prefer fabric. I think it's just easier to use than plastic. The types of, so we are going to give out the fabric. We're also going to give out these galvanized steel wire hoops, and they're pretty flexible. They're not very tall. They are sized for the fabric that we're giving out to. They're great really for short crops like lettuce, spinach, root veggies, baby greens. Sometimes kale, broccoli, collards, they may get a little too tall for these hoops. So that's something to consider. And the hoops may bend if we get some really heavy snow conditions, but they're also fairly flexible. So that, if you go out there, don't let it sit under snow for too long. Just try to knock it off. You may be able to save your hoops from snow. If we get like a foot of snow, it may just crush them, unfortunately. But most winters we don't get that much snow. So, again, it comes down to luck in a lot of cases. There are other hoops that you can design if you want to spend more money and create a stronger support system for your coverings. So one strategy that folks use, and I'm sorry, this is kind of a blurry picture, but they'll drive pieces of rebar into the ground, and then they will use 1/2-inch PVC pipe. And so they'll just, they'll put the rebar on either side of the garden, and then they'll run the hoop over between the 2 bars of rebar. And so this is stronger, but it's also fairly flexible. So when you do get snow, they're not going to bend out of shape. But if you get too much snow, they may snap. But that will take a lot of snow. So, and you also need clamps in order to keep the fabric onto the PVC, and that's something you can buy from like greenhouse supply places, or Johnny's Seed sells these special clamps too, and they just attach really easily to the 1/2-inch PVC. This is more expensive than the wire hoops, but it's also a little more sturdier. So it just depends on what you are willing and able to invest in that. Your final option, and also the most expensive option for low tunnels that we're talking about here, is buying EMT conduit. And so this is electrical conduit. You can pick it up at the hardware store. You want to buy a 1/2-inch conduit. Excuse me. And then we have actually Build It Up has one of these hoop benders. So if this is something you're interested in doing, we can plan a time to go meet and use the hoop bender to bend some hoops with you, show you how to use it. It's pretty easy. It just takes some time, but these things are very sturdy. You will need to purchase 10-foot wide cloth. The stuff that we hand out is 7-foot wide. So if you want to go this route with the EMT, you're going to have to buy a wider grade of cloth in order to fit over it, or plastic, whatever. Anyway, so if this is a route you want to go, just holler at us and we'll meet you and help you bend some hoops. I like these hoops on raised beds. I think they go really well because you can just drill them into the side of the raised beds and then put the cloth over that. It makes a nice little system. If you are putting them into the ground, you kind of have to kind of pinch the ends of the conduit so that it forms a bit of an angle so that you can get it into the ground a little easier. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, get it into the soil, but it is totally possible. And on a commercial level, especially if you are up further north, like in Maine or New England, going with this conduit is worthwhile because they get so much snow. But we can get away with cheaper materials because we don't usually get as much snow as they do. So do we run one row under each cover or two? It really just depends on the size of your plants. If you're trying to get a taller plant like kale, I probably would just run one row down the middle of it so that, hopefully that the plant is under the highest point. But if you're doing short things like lettuce or spinach, you could probably fit, just depends on the size of your row, but you could probably get 3 or 4 rows of like spinach. And maybe 2 or 3 rows of like lettuce or something, or 3 or 4 rows of carrots, that kind of thing, under one of these hoops. So it just depends on the size of the plant, basically. Does that answer your question? Hopefully. Okay. All right. So constructing these things, when we get the fabric in, or maybe I think we have some leftover fabric from last year. So Rosie and I can probably whip together a little video demonstration of this real quick. So y'all can see this. I know some people learn a little easier if they see it on a video rather than me just trying to explain it. But you want to set your hoops about 4 feet apart. You really don't want to space them much wider than that. You could probably go a little closer together, but the closer together they are, the more weight they're going to be able to support snow-wise. So 4 feet is probably your maximum. And then cloth-wise, you just want to measure out your row. So if you have a 20-foot row that you want to cover, you're going to set your hoops every 4 feet, and then you want to cut we're going to give, I think we're going to give out 100 feet of cloth at least. I can't remember exactly how long these spools of cloth are, but we're going to give you about 100 feet, 120 feet or something of cloth. So you just need to, so if your row is 20 feet, then, you probably need 32 feet of cloth cut per row. You want at least 6 feet extra at the ends. And this way the cloth can hang down and you'll have enough to anchor it on the soil. If you don't leave that enough, then you're just going to have, open ends to your tunnels, and air is going to be able to circulate in. So you really want to think about creating a totally closed tunnel. I'll show you a picture in a second. And you also need to gather heavy blunt objects to hold the cloth down. You don't want stuff with sharp edges to it. So this could include your old T-posts that you were using for trellising, bricks, sandbags, bags of rock, whatever. You can even just dig up piles of soil next to it and pile that on the edges. And also the tighter that the cloth or plastic is pulled, the more resistant to snow damage it will be. So we'll make a video, and you can also, if you want to look up tutorials on constructing low tunnels, there's plenty online. So here's some examples. And here's what I was talking about with the raised bed with the galvanized hoops. It's a nice system. So you can just kind of see, and this is there's the PVC and the rebar down on the bottom here. So you can see different kinds of constructions and how tight the fabric and the plastic is. And you can also see on the ends how they've kind of bunched it up and pulled it really tight so that there's kind of a stronger system going on here. And again, a little more. So sometimes these are all kind of thicker grade hoops. So you can kind of see that you can stretch them a little further and cover, this looks like 6 rows of vegetables. So just, there's all kinds of different ways to construct these things. If you go online, you can find lots of ideas. So ours is but one method that we're giving out. But if you want to explore more ways of frost protection, there's a whole wide world out there. So if you are a farmer or considering commercial production, or really just want a really big badass structure that's going to grow a ton of food for your family, you can consider investing in a high tunnel or a caterpillar tunnel, which I'll talk about next. But This is a local farm up in Mountain City that I took this picture at. And so you can see that he actually has a high tunnel, and then he's got these low tunnels within his high tunnel. So he's getting a ton of frost protection on these plants here. And then the cool thing is that the NRCS, which is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is part of the USDA, has programs for beginning farmers. And that just means anyone with less than 10 years of farming experience. And that probably qualifies all of you to get one of these things. So there's a process to it. If you want to get one, the nice thing about this cost share is that it's 90% cost share. So it pays for 90% of the cost of putting one of these things up. And just about anyone can get their piece of property declared a farm. I think you need a minimum space of 1/100 of an acre, which is 400 square feet or 420 square feet. And then you can get your backyard declared a farm by the USDA. It's a bit of a process, but I can walk you through it if you're totally interested, and then you will qualify for these high tunnel programs from the NRCS. So if you want to do that, and that's something we definitely talk about in the field school beginning farmer program, but I will also happily walk anyone through it. So the other option, and so this 90% cost share, it's 90% of what the NRCS has determined that a high tunnel costs. So if you have to do grading work or any kind of other work on your property in order to make it ready to put one of these tunnels on it, it may not cover that cost. So there may be some expenses for you. And then you also have to pay for the high tunnel out of pocket first, and then you get reimbursed by the NRCS. So you have to have that cash up front in order to get reimbursed by the NRCS. But there are some ways around that. There are certain lenders that are familiar with these high tunnel programs, and so they're familiar with the NRCS program. So basically, they'll front you the money, and you don't pay anything on the loan, and then the NRCS just cuts the check directly to these lenders. So there are some options for that if you want to talk about that. But that's just a little bit about this program. A cheaper option. So these are very sturdy. They're made out of steel. It's like a whole kit from a manufacturer. And these things will take, a lot of snow and a lot of wind. But if you don't qualify for the NRCS program, or you don't want to deal with the federal government, then you can construct a caterpillar tunnel. So these are more DIY situations. So it's somewhere between a high tunnel and the little low tunnels we were talking about in your garden. So this might fit maybe 3 or 4 rows. So you might be able to cover your whole garden with 1 or 2 caterpillar tunnels. They are less sturdy than a high tunnel, but they're also very cheap to build. So whereas a high tunnel may be $7,000 or $8,000 to construct, a caterpillar tunnel may be $700 or $800, if that, in materials. Sometimes cheaper if you can scrounge your way into materials. I know folks that have built, high tunnels and greenhouses, these kind of things for $200 or $300. So it just depends on how resourceful you are. Excuse me. So the caterpillar tunnels are high enough to walk in, so they should be 7 or 8 feet tall, and will cover 3 or 4 rows in your garden. And then again, you can combine these with low tunnels over individual rows in order to get twice as much frost protection. There are tons and tons of plans on the internet for how to construct caterpillar tunnels for super cheap. If that's something you want to look into, it's probably more approachable than a high tunnel. Okay, questions real quick. No?
Lexi, I have a question.
Yes.
How is a high tunnel different from a greenhouse, especially how it relates to the NRCS funding?
Great question. So according to the NRCS, a high tunnel is a structure where you are planting in the earth. So you have rows, if you can see in this picture, rows of plants that go directly into the earth. This dude has built raised beds, but that still counts because they're only like 7 inch or 12 inches tall. So this still counts as technically being in earth. Whereas a greenhouse, according to NRCS definitions, is a structure where you are raising plants in pots on tables and they are not going directly into the earth. So I think in layman's terms, this looks like a greenhouse, right? So you're just going to, so it's a protected shelter. Anything protected shelter is a greenhouse, but in agriculture, the high tunnel refers to a structure where you plant in the ground and the rows are protected that way. And a greenhouse is a structure where you're growing plants in pots, not in native soil. High tunnels also tend to be unheated. These particular ones do have ventilation systems for the summer. So they're moving air, hot air out during the summer, but they are not heated during the winter. So it's just totally relying on passive heat from the sun and that way. Whereas a greenhouse usually has some sort of heat source like electricity or oil or even wood heat in a greenhouse. And so that's the major difference. You can heat a high tunnel, but usually it is not cost effective to do so. Most people don't heat their high tunnels. So that's kind of the main differences between a greenhouse and a high tunnel. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It also leads to another question. Do the high tunnels have to be as large as what is pictured here, or can they be on a smaller scale for a backyard farmer?
Oh yeah, they can absolutely be on a smaller scale. This farmer, Richard, was going for this is probably the maximum size that you could get under the NRCS grant. I think it's probably a 30 by 72 foot structure, but definitely they make smaller structures for sure. And the NRCS cost share is by the square foot. So you tell them what size structure you want, and they will offer you a reimbursement based on the square footage. So yeah, and there's all kinds of kits online for high tunnels, so you can kind of get a sense of what the cost is if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And just for anyone who's interested, I just got a farm number here a couple of weeks ago. It was so easy. We just called the FSA and I probably spent 10 minutes on the phone. I had all the documents emailed to me and just signed everything. It was really easy.
Awesome. Yeah, good. Yeah, and basically you can get anything larger than 400 square feet declared a farm. So if you want to access these programs, that's totally cool. I do think you need to have the intention of commercial production, but they don't necessarily verify that in the future. So they do verify you have to grow in earth with an NRCS high tunnel for like 3, it depends on the term of the contract with them. It's either 3 or 5 years. After that, you can do whatever you want with the structure. But during that time, you have to be growing in earth. And I guess technically they can ask for their money back if they find you in violation of that, but I don't know that they actually check. But anyway, I'm going to break for just a second and go get some more water so I can keep talking. So I'll be right back. If anyone else needs to like make a quick bathroom break, now is your chance. I am back. Okay, should we wait for next year to apply for the NRCS programs? I will say, as with everything in the federal government, it takes forever to get approved for these things. So if you're thinking about it for next year, you may want to get in line, put your application in this year so that next year, you may get approved and be able to spend money. I think once you're approved, you have 12 months to then purchase and construct the thing. You do have to have it finished within their timeline, otherwise they won't reimburse you. But yeah, if you think you want to do it next year, I'd probably get started on the process now. Because if you get started next year, it might not be until 2023 that you get approved for funding, just because it's the federal government. So just word for the wise.
And to add on to that, Lexi, because once again, we're working with the NRCS right now,
Yeah.
that for the next fiscal year, the application opens in October. And I believe that the application then has to be submitted by December. And then that will then get you approved, I think, in January. And then the cycle continues. So if you don't apply right now in October, you'd have to wait until the following October and then wait for the government bureaucracy to continue.
Yeah. So that's what you're looking at. Yeah, that's right. The cycle usually resets in October, but sometimes that changes year to year. So yeah, you have to get your farm number from the FSA, and then you have to talk to the NRCS. If you're in Washington County, conveniently, these offices are located right next to each other on the John Exon Parkway. Anyway, it's on the road to Jonesboro. So something definitely to just think about if you have the space for it. All right, I'm going to keep moving. If you have more questions, just pop them into the chat. So garlic. I absolutely love planting garlic. It is very hands-off, very easy to grow. And I think we're giving everyone half a pound. Don't quote me on that. It'll be something around there. And then that will grow into 2 to 3 pounds of garlic at harvest. So you planted it in October. It will be optimal to plant it in October, but honestly, sometimes I don't get around until late November, early December, and it grows fine. So you have a pretty wide window to plant it. You want to get it in before the ground freezes absolutely solid, but we're in East Tennessee, so it's usually January before that really happens. So you have a pretty wide window. It'll do best if you plant it in October when we give it out, but there is some leeway if life happens and you can't get it in. So we are purchasing certified disease-free seed garlic. And if you go online and you look for seed garlic, you're going to notice that it's pretty dang expensive. So someone asked me, a few years ago, they were like, well, I don't want to plant garlic, but can I just take it and eat it? And I would be like, no, this stuff is very expensive. If you just want to eat garlic, go buy the cheap stuff from the grocery store. That's fine. This is for planting because it's certified disease-free. And there are a ton of diseases that will destroy your garlic crop. Which is why I don't recommend that you go to the store and just purchase regular garlic and then try to plant that. It may work out fine. It may be carrying some kind of soil-borne disease that will infect your soil, and then you'll never be able to plant garlic in that spot again, because it's going to be a carrier for some garlic rot or whatever. So please plant the stuff that we hand out. It is worthwhile. So and you can also save garlic year to year and try planting it. But again, you run the risk of picking up some kind of disease from your soil. And then if you replant it, you're just kind of reinfecting your garlic. So that's the problem with saving garlic these days. I think it used to be better 10, 20 years ago. There was less disease circulating for garlic, but these days you're going to get the best results if you buy the certified disease-free stuff. Maybe the slide will change. I don't know what's going on. Okay, there we go. So we're going to give you garlic in a whole head, and you're going to need to break that into individual cloves. Okay, so don't try to plant the whole head of garlic that's going to contain, 8 or 10 cloves. You need to break it apart carefully. And you're going to plant the individual cloves into the soil. Don't peel them, leave that skin on, that papery skin like you see in the picture. That's pretty important. It'll help protect it from critters and disease a little bit. You want to inspect each clove. We're not going to inspect all of the garlic before we hand it out. So you need to look at each clove. If you notice any soft or brown spots, don't plant that one. You want to really only plant the healthiest looking cloves that you can. If you're if you've saved garlic and you want to replant it, you can. I don't think you need to do this with the stuff we're handing out, but if you're saving garlic, or if you buy it from the local garlic from the farmer's market or something and you want to try planting it, you can soak it overnight in a 1 gallon of water plus 1 teaspoon of baking soda overnight, and then when you go to plant it, then just dip it in isopropyl alcohol really quick and then put that in the soil, and that will hopefully clear up any kind of disease pathogens that are clinging to the outside of the garlic and prevent them from replicating and killing your garlic. So you don't need to do this for this stuff that we're handing out, but if you do want to use an alternative supply of garlic that is not certified disease-free, you can do this and try to prevent as much disease as you can. Do we have a question? Do you have a preferred vendor for garlic? So we've purchased this stuff that we're getting from Fedco, and they have a really awesome selection of garlic. So True Seed has a good selection, and they're Asheville, and then Southern Exposure Seed Exchange up in Charlottesville, Virginia, somewhere in Virginia. They also have a really good selection. So they'll have a lot of varieties that will grow well in our area if you're looking to buy them. And a lot of these companies have like sample packs where you can get, 2 or 3 different varieties of garlic in smaller quantities so that you can plant them. You will be shocked by the prices on garlic. I'm just going to put that out there. If you look it up, you'll be like, why is it so expensive? But again, it's certified disease-free. So you're making sure that you're getting a product that's going to grow for you. So that's what you're paying for. But people are always shocked by the price of garlic. So planting garlic, you want to plant them 4 to 6 inches apart. They don't need to be that much space. They're pretty narrow plants. So in row 4 to 6 inches apart, and you want your rows 6 inches apart. So you can kind of see this picture. We have pre-dug, we put a tape measure down and then pre-dug a bunch of holes so we can just kind of go through the line and then plop the cloves down into each hole pretty quickly. So it makes planting a lot quicker. You want the holes, you can plant garlic pretty deep, up to 3 inches deep. The deeper, it likes going pretty deep, so don't be afraid to get it down in the soil. You want to place the cloves pointy side up with the flat side down. The flat side is where the roots are going to grow out, so you want to make sure that that is facing down into the soil. And then kind of pat the soil down around the garlic. Rosie, did we make a video on planting garlic last year?
I'm pretty sure we did.
Okay. I know we planted garlic last year together.
Yeah.
I assume that was because we were making a video, but I honestly, my brain is
I honestly can't remember. But it'd be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Okay. We think we made a video.
They blend together.
Which, by the way, you need to come pick up your garlic at some point because it's ready. And then once the garlic is in the ground and you've covered the holes back up and patted it down, then you want to put down mulch as much as you can. You want probably 6 inches of material. And this can be a nice layer of compost, some shredded leaves or grass or straw, whatever. You just want to get a thick layer of mulch down. You do not need to put row cover over the garlic. The mulch is totally sufficient to keep it over winter. Basically, you're worried about frost heaves with garlic. So if the soil temperature swings rapidly in either direction, you run into the issue of the frost heaves and the garlic gets separated from its roots. So that's what you don't want. So it can take very cold temperatures and survive, no problem. It's really the frost heaves that you're trying to prevent. So you need the mulch to protect it from that. The mulch is going to go a long way in keeping the weeds down too. But when the plants start emerging in the spring, you want to go through and just make sure that you get any small weeds out of there and keep it well weeded until the plants get a little bigger and will help block out the sun. We do give out hardneck garlic. There's 2 kinds of garlic. There's the hardneck. There's probably more than 2 kinds, but the 2 main kinds are hardneck and softneck garlic. Hardneck garlic produces a scape, which is like a little flower bud that comes up usually in June. And then when it starts to curl around, you want to cut it off. They make great pesto. They have this nice garlicky flavor. You can make pesto or stir fry, whatever. There's tons of recipes online. If you just look up how to cook garlic scapes, you'll find lots of ideas. But you want to cut the scapes off because if you let it flower, it's going to put energy into the flower and make a smaller root bulb. But so if you cut the flower off, it's going to concentrate on growing a bigger root bulb. And then once you cut the scapes, that's usually your sign that they're ready to harvest in about 2 weeks after the scape. We will send out another email with all of these instructions. And then you need to cure it. Again, we will explain that via email. And then cured garlic usually lasts 4 to 6 months if it's in the right kind of storage location. Okay, any questions about garlic? You could grow garlic in containers. It's probably just not going to get as big as it would in earth. But yes, I have seen plenty of people growing it in containers. In fact, I think we've had people who were moving over the winter, and so they put their garlic in like a kiddie pool filled with dirt. I'm sure that was pretty heavy to move, but I guess it did all right. So yeah, totally. Any other questions about garlic?
Lexi, I have a question about the garlic.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking to them. Last year when I did the, I'm talking about. Okay. Last year, the garlic that I harvested last year is all cured up. It's braided. It's hanging. And when I was going through them, I noticed that some of them had little holes in the stem. And I cut those open. I pulled out worms. I inspected everything before I braided them up. And then, so I obviously missed some of the worms because the garlic's all eaten up and whatnot. But how do I prevent that this year?
I'll have to look up what that is specifically because I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, I guess just close inspection and making sure that you are finding anything that's been infested and then pulling it out before it has the chance to replicate and spread. But I'll make a note and I'll see if I can find more information for you about what specific pest that might be. And then we can find more information about if there's something you could spray on them or something. I'm not sure. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't, and I didn't even notice anything until I was like already harvested, already like inspecting them to put away, and it was just tiny little holes.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I'll look up more information, see what I can find for you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sweet taters. September is the start of sweet potato harvest time. The longer that you leave them in the ground, the more they will grow. So if you got them in kind of late or they got kind of a slow start, you can push the harvest time as far back as you can, hoping that you will get a larger crop out of it. However, these plants are very frost sensitive. If they are exposed to any amount of frost, you will ruin the underground crop. So you need to keep an eye on the weather forecast and get them out immediately if frost is in the forecast. So if you are going to push the harvest, into October, hoping to get larger tubers, then you just really need to keep a close eye on the weather so you get them out in time. You will not get a harvest that looks like a pile of sweet potatoes that you would get at the supermarket. Those are, grade A sweet potatoes and they meet certain specifications. And then all of the other sweet potatoes that you are not seeing at the supermarket are probably going into like processed sweet potato products like purees or fries or whatever. So I think people are always surprised at the range of sizes that you get from your sweet potatoes. Some of them may be a 4-pound honker, like the one I'm holding that is almost the size of my head. Or they may be really tiny or weirdly shaped or whatever. So I just want to put that out there because sometimes I get emails of like, my sweet potatoes look really weird. And I'm like, well, they just don't look like they come in the supermarket because those are, grade A or whatever wholesale sweet potatoes. So just word for the wise. Hopefully you won't get too many of these 4-pound honkers because they're kind of hard to, that's a lot of sweet potato. But anyway, so you want to get in there very carefully with a garden fork. You want to start about a foot from, you're going to have a lot of vines. So what I do is I go through and I just cut the vines out. And try to identify where the main base of the vines are originating, and cut the vines off. And so I can see clearly where they are. And then I go about a foot away from the base of the vines, and with a garden fork or a shovel, and you just get in there and kind of gently leverage it up. You don't want to hit a tuber with the tine of your fork or your shovel. So you just want to be careful, get it in there, kind of leverage the soil up. You don't want to be too violent on that end either, because you don't want the tubers to break off in the soil. So you just kind of carefully wiggle it under there and leverage the potatoes up. Most of the tubers will be at the base of the plants. Sometimes the vines will root and produce smaller tubers further out. So if a vine is resisting you pulling it up, you can kind of just go investigate and kind of poke around and see if there's anything in there. Most often there's not. It's just a little root that's gone down. But some years, especially the vines were really vigorous from the start, and they had enough time to kind of root and grow more tubers along it. I've found all kinds of fun stuff further away from the vine. So just be aware that they will root and produce tubers further along, but they may not be as big. So sweet potatoes need to be cured to reach their optimal sweetness, but they're still pretty good if you don't cure them. I rarely get them in the right conditions for curing, but if you are on a commercial, or even if you're on a large scale, if you've got more than like 10 or 20 pounds that you're digging up, you're probably going to want to figure out how to cure them properly so that they'll last longer in storage and you'll have time to eat them all. So it needs to be a dark location. It needs to be 85 degrees in this location with an 85% humidity for 5 to 7 days. So these are not conditions you are going to be able to recreate on a home scale for a small quantity very easily. So I wouldn't worry about it. But if you, like I said, if you have 50 or 100 pounds of sweet potatoes, you're going to want to cure them so that they'll store longer. So if you have like a basement bathroom, you can get the temperature up with a little heater and get a little home humidifier, and just kind of get that into a nice steamy warm condition for 5 to 7 days, and that is going to start the curing process. And then you want to bring them for long-term storage, 60 degrees Fahrenheit with 85% humidity. Again, don't store sweet potatoes at temps lower than 50 degrees, or the tubers will be damaged. It's best to let them sit for a month or so before eating, to really get that full sugar development in the tubers. In all honesty, I just keep them in a crate in my dining room with a cardboard box over them. And I usually get through most of the winter. I usually get to like February with my sweet potatoes, if I don't eat them all sooner. So don't wait to eat your storage crops. Quality will start to go downhill after January, February. So really just don't save them, basically just eat them as fast as you can. So that's usually not a problem with sweet potatoes in my house. We eat a lot of sweet potatoes. So any questions? I want to try to get through the last bit of my slides because it is after 7 already. Basically just keep an eye on the weather and don't let them get frosted. But you can let them go into October if you want to try to get more roots out of them. Okay, fall chores. You really, once things start dying, you want to get them out of your garden. You want to weed really thoroughly. Don't let weeds go to seed. So the cover crops that we're giving out, there's more information in our previous month presentation if you want to go on YouTube and look at that up again, all about cover crops. You can plant cover crops or you can mulch. You can't do both, but you should do one or the other. Do not let your soil just go bare into the winter. That's probably the worst possible situation. Please don't let your weeds go to seed. certain common weeds like lamb's quarters or pigweed will produce 100,000 seeds per plant. So if this, you know, if even just 2 of those like drop seeds in your garden, you're going to have, you know, hundreds of thousands of new weeds growing next year. So really do the best you can to prevent that from happening. Clean up plant material, especially anything that had diseases, which generally includes nightshades and squash and melons and that kind of stuff. So get that out, trash or burn them. Probably don't put them in your compost pile unless you are actively managing it and turning it regularly and monitoring the temperatures. I say this frequently: if composting is not a pain in the butt, then you're probably not doing it correctly. So a poorly managed compost pile is just probably breeding weed seeds and diseases because it's not getting up to the temperatures that's going to kill these 2 things. So just keep that in mind. And then, you know, take the winter months to kind of clean and organize your tools. They benefit from being sharpened and oiled. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to sharpen and properly care for your tools. So take some time this winter to look that up. And then review your garden plans and figure out, you know, just make some notes about what you because you had that garden plan that we did in the spring together. Just kind of take a look at it and make notes about what actually happened, because you probably did not follow it to the T. And you know, make any notes like something did well, something died immediately, you want to plant this variety again, you want to try a new variety, you know, you actually moved you know, your row broccoli to this other section. So just make notes of that so you know next spring what you did. And then sign up for seed catalogs. They'll start coming in December. And it's a lot of fun, you know, in the darkest part of the year to just, you know, drink hot cocoa and look at seed catalogs. So that's my advice. And then I think we are done unless there are more questions.
Lexi, what seed catalogs do you recommend signing up for?
Ooh, my favorite are Fedco and Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. And then I also like Johnny's and So True Seed. Those are my top 4. Baker's Creek is fun too. I don't tend to buy a lot of Baker's Creek seeds, but they're fun to look at the pictures. Yeah, I think those are my favorite.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question regarding garlic. If it goes until June, is there something we can plant, I guess, after we harvest that it will still be good for that row or area?
Yeah, so what I usually do is I'll probably put in like buckwheat immediately following the garlic, and let that go for 6 weeks, and then I will put in fall brassicas in that spot. Is usually what I follow garlic with. If you were really on top of your crop planning, you could probably start like zucchini or something fast growing in pots like 3 weeks before you wanted to harvest your garlic. And then when you harvest the garlic, you could put in squash and probably still have time for a crop of like zucchini or something. But generally in my crop plan, I generally follow garlic with a quick summer cover crop like buckwheat, and then fall brassicas. Okay, this is our first year in Build It Up. Do we apply for next year? We will send out a form asking if you want to return. So you're allowed 2 years in the program. So we will send out a form asking you if you want to continue for a second year and then to update your information. So we will send that out probably in October or November, sometime around there. Applications for new gardeners will open in January. So we'll send that out to folks too. Don't fill out that form, but we would love for you to send it along to friends and family who may want to join the program next year. Yes, Rebecca, thank you. Great. Any other questions? If not, we can all go on with our evenings.